Hey guys, Parfax here. Today I'm going to bring you a really fun video for you when it comes to New World. So today I'm going to be ranking all of the weapons in New World when it comes to PvP. Now we're going to do this mainly on an overall scale, so if you're looking to maybe start New World, you're going to be able to look at this list, and of course this is just my opinion. You may think the weapon I have is the worst, is maybe the best, but that's what these tier lists are good for. It opens up discussions, lets you know where my thoughts are at, and how I view the weapon. So we're going to go over things like small group, large group, sieges, all that kind of stuff. We're going to kind of wrap it into one big tier list. Now we're going to go in, I'm probably going to do different tier lists. We're going to do siege tier lists. We're going to do, out soloing tier list. We'll do like a PvE tier list. We can do all of those, but we're going to do an overall tier list to just kind of judge if you just want to main one weapon / two weapons in the game. This will be the tier list for you. Okay, first we're going to talk about the battle axe. Now, for those of you that don't know, the battle axe actually has a bug right now. So the battle axe will actually deal double damage. I've heard it two different ways. I know for a fact that on your left auto attack, it will hit twice. I heard somebody tell me, I actually killed him and I hit him. I barely actually even hit him with the battle axe, but got really salty and was like, oh, you only killed me because you used the battle axe. You fully charged heavy attack, and then your next attack did double damage. Well, it's like, well, I never actually fully charged heavy once with the battle axe, but I guess there is possibly a bug with it dealing double damage as well when you do a fully charged heavy with the battle axe. So it's kind of hard to rate its damage, because right now it's probably the best weapon in the game. It has a little bit of everything. It has CC, it has decent damage, it has a movement skill, it has an execute, which is almost unusable. If they'd give it maybe like a little bit more range, maybe make the animation a little faster, that would put it even higher. Now we're going to go with the assumption that we're taking out the double damage, and we're going to rate this. I think I'm still going to put it in the S tier. The reason I put it in the S tier is if you are doing large scale sieges, this is, in my opinion, the best weapon in the game. If you're going for at least a tank frontline bruiser style playstyle, this has really good AoE. You can build it as AoE focused. It has one of the best abilities in the game when it comes to even small scale, depending on what you're doing. But it has an absorption field that sucks in players. It is absolutely fantastic. It has a pull that you can pull the enemy back towards you. It has a gap closer. It has an execute, which I said it doesn't work that well, but it overall has a great kit. It's got a bunch of AoEs. Never use Whirlwind. Whirlwind is the worst skill in the game. And it's funny because the weapon has like some of the best skills in the game, and then it has probably the worst. Whirlwind or any type of Cyclone is typically a very standard iconic skill in the game, but you have no grit, nothing to really prevent you from getting CC'd. So even in PvE, unless you're doing dungeons and the tank has full aggro, you're going to start whirlwinding and you're just going to get CC'd. So it's essentially a useless skill. But other than that, this weapon's insane. Even in 1v1s, even without the double damage, this weapon is really good. It's going to allow you to catch your target, stay on top of them, and it does a lot of damage. Even its auto attacks deal a lot of damage, so we're put it in the S tier. Next we have probably my favorite weapon in the game, and that is the bow. The bow, where do we want to put it? No, we're definitely not putting it in S tier. We're probably gonna put the bow in the C tier. Now it's in the C tier for a couple different ways. Now if we were doing large scale siege, this is going to get bumped up a little bit. The bow is actually not bad. It has a penetrating shot. It has some AoE damage in large scale sieges. The problem with the bow is it's partly the servers, partly the hitboxes are so tiny that it's actually really hard to consistently hit your bow shots, which means you will be doing essentially less damage because you're not hitting your targets as much. We're going to talk about another fully ranged weapon in the musket, but the advantage the musket has over the bow is that the bullets fire faster. You don't have to account that much for the target running. You can see some of my clips where I do decent with the bow. I'm popping shots off of the bow. It's really fun, but the bow isn't very good. Now you can pair it something with like the spear And if you land the spear throw, which knocks them down, you can then swap to the bow and do a rapid fire. And I've done that and get some decent kills. I was actually, I did decent early on when this beta came out for actually using the bow, but it's just not a great weapon. The hitboxes are very tiny. Desync on the server sometimes can be an issue. And when you're messing with any type of desync or any type of lag, or just people being really fast and like light armor, the bow is incredibly hard to hit. Mind you, this is my favorite weapon in the game. There is nothing better than going out PvEing with the bow and even getting some really cool kills with the bow. But it's just kind of low tier, especially in the small group aspect. Next, we have the Fire Staff. The Fire Staff, we are going to put in the... Man, do we put it in the B tier or the A tier? It's like B plus A minus. We're going to put it in the A minus tier. 1v1s, this weapon is not good. The weapon doesn't do quite enough damage to really output that much pressure from ranged. It has some slow casting abilities, but when it comes to siege, this weapon rips. Now, it probably could use a little bit of a tune-up. It probably needs a little bit more damage, but this weapon is really good in siege, and which is the reason why it's up there. It's kind of like the bow in the instance that it's a lot better in siege than it is in small group. It's not horrible. You can kill people with the fire staffs. You can kill people with any of these weapons. You can kill people with the life staff. Like so don't get it twisted. All these weapons are good. But the fire staff, it needs a little bit of setup on some of its really good skills, and it allows you to do that in siege when you're not getting pressured that much. But it's overall a great weapon, and it's a lot of fun to play. Next, we're going to have the Ice Gauntlet. So the Ice Gauntlet, now I haven't played it in the closed beta, but I played it in the alpha beta that we had here before the closed beta, whenever it came out. And this weapon, we're gonna put it in the S tier for one reason, because it's really not the best at anything, but it is super solid on everything. It does okay damage, or decent damage. It has decent CC. It has decent utility. It is actually just an overall extremely well balanced and good weapon. You can be a light armor user that jumps around and does damage with it while putting down your little frost totem and CCing people. You can be a CC support class with it. You can be a healer running the Ice Gauntlet as a backup weapon. You can be a frontline tank with the Ice Gauntlet. It really just has so many uses that have a hard time not putting it in the S tier for that reason. It is an extremely well-balanced weapon, and I love what they did with it, and it's actually a lot of fun to play. If you haven't used the Ice Gauntlet out of all these weapons, I really suggest you to do it. Next, we have the Hatchet. The Hatchet is a fan favorite, especially in the last open beta where it was absolutely busted with its stagger. We're going to put this very solidly in the A tier. Now, in the 1v1, this can be essentially the best weapon. It has the best catch in the game with its Berserk. Berserk is just crazy. If you haven't played around with the Berserk skill, Berserk is absolutely nuts. It gives you so many bonuses. It gives you speed. It gives you healing. It gives you... you could not die. Like, this is insane on it. Now, it is a passive, so it can make the axe a little bit more boring to play because you're only essentially accessing 2 skills instead of the 3. But it's just really good in the 1v1, and it's okay in sieges too. It has an AoE disease that you can put on people, which is an anti-healing. You can make a very good, case that this should be S tier. But we're gonna put it down to A tier just because it is not quite as good in siege. Now, it's a decent backup weapon. So let's say you're running, I don't know, musket axe. That's something you can do, or spear axe. Well, I wouldn't run spear axe, but sword and board axe. You can then just use the axe for Berserk to get in and out of combat, give yourself a little bit of heal. You could run the poison throw as well to debuff your enemies. Really good. It's not necessarily like a main weapon when it comes to sieges. Like, I wouldn't necessarily run this as my main weapon because I really want to focus on AoE damage when it comes to those large scale group fights. but it is an insanely good weapon, and you can make a very good case it should be an S tier. Next, we have the Life Staff. This is easy. It's the only healing weapon in the game, so this is just going flat in S tier. It is great. It's not the best in the 1v1 case, but there's no way I can't put the only healing weapon in the S tier. So, you know, you can have a problem with that or not, but there's no way I'm not throwing it up there, and that's kind of all I have to say about the Life Staff. If you're going to be a healer, you're always going to be picked. So next we have the Spear, which is one of my weapons that I've actually played a decent amount in this closed beta as well, and it was kind of one of my favorites. We're going to put it in the A tier, mainly because it's kind of A tier for 1v1s and A tier for sieges. Now it might be more like a B in sieges, but it does have some decent utility with its AoE knockdown. Now knockdowns are the easiest form of CC to get out of because people can just dodge roll out of it really quickly. But it does have some okay lockdown potential. It has some okay damage. I used it a lot in my first siege. I won't be using it in my second siege. We'll be using Great Axe Warhammer. But you could make an argument this could possibly be B tier because it's not maybe that great for sieges. But when it comes to the 1v1, if you can land a spear throw, you have 3 solid forms of CC, and it can be very deadly and very CC lock, very good CC, and decent damage too. So overall, a fun weapon, something, you know, maybe not everybody wants to play because it is just very a CC weapon, and you can kind of tag it with another weapon that makes it really good. Like I used to run Spear Bow. That way, if I got the spear throw knockdown, then I could just use the bow to try to finish him off. You know what? I've kind of convinced myself to put it in the B tier. We're gonna put it down there because it's just not that great with it. The spear, you can have it as a knockback or a knockdown, and then you have an AoE knockdown, which is great, but knockdown, like I said, is the easiest form of CC to get out of. But it does have its kick, which is a nice little stun. So picture this as a B plus A minus weapon. Next, we have Sword and Board. I haven't played Sword and Board in a while. So this is probably the weapon I'm the least confident about rating. We're gonna put it in the A tier mainly because it's just the main tank weapon. It has some pretty decent abilities. It's got some AoE. It's very defensive with its shield. You can then run like shield charge for some extra movability. It's a pretty decent weapon. It's just kind of similar in its sieging and in its small group. I know a lot of healers. The sort of meta healer build is, I believe, Sword and Board and the heal staff. You run like a Constitution and Focus play style to be kind of very tanky and have your healing staff. So just an overall solid weapon, very balanced from what I've seen and what people have told me. I have played a lot of Sword, but the last time I played Sword, I'm not going to lie to you, was probably 7 months ago. So it's been a little while since I played Sword and Board, but a very decent weapon. Next, we're going to go Musket. I think this is going to be my most controversial pick. We're putting it in the B tier. Now, we're putting it ahead of the bow because it's definitely ahead of the bow. Just because its bullet drop is less. It's decent in sieges, decent in the 1v1, but again, desync and just small hitboxes make this weapon extremely hard to use. Now, you're going to find people that are going to be out there that are extremely good at first-person shooters and extremely good at all that kind of thing, and they're going to make very good use of it. But for the average player, people are going to pick up the musket and thinking they're actually doing some good work with it, but they're really not. They're going to do a couple damaging shots with it, but they'd just be a lot more impactful if they use something like the Fire Staff or the Ice Gauntlet. Heck, even any of the melee weapons. So maybe even the bow, because the bow at least has some AoE in like siege situations. But it's a decent weapon. In the right hands, it can be really good. But again, it is very hard to actually land your range shots. Like if you go back and watch the footage of the siege that I did, the 50v50 siege, it was just 80% of ranged shots were just missing. Now, I got hit by 3 or 4 musket shots in a row, and it hurt. I even blocked a couple, and it still hurt. But you know, I just can get out of there and heal. You're essentially just doing almost useless damage. Now, am I saying the musket is useless? Not at all. It can be very good. I just think that a lot of people are going to pick it up because it's a cool ranged weapon. People like guns, people like muskets, but they're not going to be nearly as effective if they were just using another weapon because it's just a very higher skill capped weapon. Next, we're going to have the Warhammer. We're putting the Warhammer also in the B category. There is a very meta build with the Great Axe and Warhammer. The only reason why I'm putting the Warhammer in B, it's kind of, again, like the Spear, where it's B plus A-, is because it is the slowest weapon in the game. It has no gap closers, and no, the little short leap isn't a gap closer. It has some decent CC, but you do have to be on top of people, and without a gap closer, it is kind of hard to land. Now, if you compare it with something like the Great Axe, it moves up into the A tier because the Great Axe, especially with absorption and its pull-in, can really utilize the short range. You can keep people really close to you. But the Warhammer by itself is a okay weapon, especially for like big sieges. Like, you can get it and give some pretty big damage while you're in there, but it does lack for some grit, and it's just an okay weapon. There's nothing terribly special about it. In PvE, it is insane. Does a lot of damage. I really like it. But in PvP, you really need to be on top of people. Sometimes the hitboxes are kind of wonky with the with the Warhammer. It feels like you should be hitting them, but you're actually not. And that is partially probably a bug in the game. There's a few things like that still that they need to get fixed. The hatchet has it as well, where you feel like you have to be inside the person to actually hit them. I don't know if it is the game needs to put a little bit more range on the weapons, or if it's just hitboxes / targeting is a little bit off. But still a great weapon, a lot of fun. Next, we have the Rapier. So before this closed beta started, I was actually running bow and Rapier on the alpha test client, and it was a lot of fun. I love the Rapier. We're gonna put it in the B tier. Now, I don't think we had something in the B tier for the longest time, and then I think I just went like almost 4 for 4 putting weapons here in the B tier. But when it comes to the Rapier, it's just an overall decent weapon. It does some pretty good single target damage. If you can wear leather armor and really get this thing rocking, or even light armor, jump around, avoid damage, you get in there and you can really annihilate somebody with this Rapier. But it does have a gap closer, which is really good, but it's essentially just a straight damaging weapon. It doesn't have a ton of utility, so it really knocks it down in large scale sieges. It is mainly a single target weapon, which knocks it down in sieges. And when you're dueling and stuff like that, it's a pretty decent weapon. It's probably an A tier 1v1 small group weapon, but the more and more people get into the group, the more and more people get into the fight, this kind of goes down and down and down just because of its low amount of AoE damage. It's really just sort of an assassin type weapon, kind of glass cannon style. All right, well, there's my tier list. We have 3 solidly in the S tier, which is the Battle Axe, the Ice Gauntlet, and the Life Staff. That Battle Axe could clearly get knocked out of there when the bug gets fixed. We could replace it with something like the Fire Staff or the Hatchet. Hatchet probably not, just because it is more of a single target weapon, but man, that Disease Throw is really good. We have the Fire Staff, the Hatchet, and the Sword solidly in the A tier. We have the Spear, the Musket, the Warhammer, the Rapier in the B tier, and the Bow in the C tier, which I mentioned was my favorite weapon. You could probably put the Bow in the B tier, but I really didn't feel like I wanted to put the Bow and the Musket in the same category, solely because I believe the Musket is strictly an upgraded version of the Bow, unfortunately. Even though it has less AoE than the Bow, it's just a better ranged weapon than the Bow due to a little bit of server lag, bullet drop, and just people being hard to hit in solo situations. Yes, you can do it in large scale, like if you're just hitting to a group of enemies, but then it suffers from the same thing that the Musket suffers from, because if I'm just firing random shots into a group of people and not really single targeting people down, it's just mean that they're going to get hit maybe a couple times, be able to walk out of the fight, get healed, then come back. So there's my tier list. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think. You can go follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/parfactgaming. You can find that in the description down below. I may be live streaming right now. Go check it out. You can see here that I have a Twitter account. Twitter, you can follow me at Parfax Gaming as well. I post updates on my live streams. If I do giveaways, if I just do random things that I talk about, I do that all the time on my Twitter. So go follow the Twitter account, the Twitch account, all that good stuff. Put it in the comment section down below where I got it wrong, where I got it right. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.